The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Millbrook as Zarathik walked toward the abandoned garage on the edge of town. Her human disguise was perfect, tall, elegant, with dark hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. No one would suspect that beneath this carefully crafted appearance lived a creature of scales and fire, a dragon shifter from the most powerful species in the galaxy. The garage sat like a forgotten monument to better times, its rusted metal, siding and broken windows telling stories of dreams that had died with the economic collapse of New Haven's mining industry. Weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete, and the old sign reading Murphy's Auto Repair hung at a defeated angle. But Zara saw potential where others saw decay. She had been on New Haven for 3 months now, ever since the Dragon Council had voted to exile her for what they called excessive compassion toward lesser species. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been banished to live among the very humans she had once defended. Her vast wealth, accumulated over centuries of careful investments, meant she could live anywhere she chose. She had chosen this backwater planet precisely because it was forgotten, overlooked, and perfect for someone who needed to disappear. The bell above the door chimed as she entered the small office attached to the garage. Behind a cluttered desk sat a man in his 40s, his hands stained with engine grease and his weathered face showing the kind of fatigue that came from fighting a losing battle. His brown hair was streaked with early gray, and his blue eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who understood complex systems. "You must be Jake Murphy," Zara said, her voice carrying just a hint of the accent she had perfected to explain any unusual speech patterns. Jake looked up from the repair manual he had been studying and nodded. "That's me." "You're the lady who called about buying the place?" "I am. I understand you're looking to sell?" Jake's laugh was bitter. "Lady, I'm 3 months behind on rent and the bank's breathing down my neck. I'm not looking to sell. I'm desperate to sell." He gestured at the empty garage bay visible through the office window. "Haven't had a customer in 2 weeks. People around here are either too broke to fix their cars or they're leaving the planet entirely." Zara pulled out a small device that looked like a standard credit reader but was actually a quantum-encrypted banking terminal linked to accounts across 12-star systems. "I'm prepared to offer you 50,000 credits for the property, with an additional 20,000 as a signing bonus." Jake's eyes widened. The property was worth maybe 15,000 on a good day. "What's the catch?" "No catch. I need the space for a project, and I need someone with your skills to help me build something. I've done my research on you, Jake Murphy. You're not just a small-town mechanic. Before you came to New Haven, you worked for Stellar Dynamics on Mars. You helped design the propulsion systems for the Artemis-class explorers." Jake's expression hardened. "That was a long time ago. I'm retired from all that now." "Retired at 42? That's unusual for someone with your expertise." Zara leaned forward slightly. "I'm not asking about your past, Jake. I'm asking about your future. I need someone who can build me a ship." "What kind of ship? A fast one?" "Something that can travel between star systems without drawing attention. Think of it as a luxury transport, comfortable, efficient, and capable of long-range travel." Jake studied her carefully. Something about this woman didn't add up. Her clothes were expensive but understated. Her manner was confident but not arrogant. And there was something in her eyes that seemed far older than her apparent age. "You're not from around here." "No, I'm not. I'm from the Centauri colonies originally. I have business interests that require discreet travel." "Discreet travel." Jake repeated the phrase slowly. "Lady, if you want discreet, you don't hire a washed-up mechanic on a backwater planet. You go to the shipyards on Europa or the custom builders on Titan." Zara smiled, and for just a moment Jake thought he saw something predatory in her expression. "Perhaps I have my reasons for preferring your services." The money was too good to pass up, and Jake knew it. 70,000 credits would not only save the garage but give him enough to start over somewhere else if things went badly. "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" "I'm not in a hurry. Quality is more important than speed. I can provide materials and components that aren't available through standard suppliers. Money is no object." Jake's mechanical instincts were already engaged. I'd need to see specifications. Power requirements, cargo capacity, passenger accommodations, defensive systems. No defensive systems, Zara interrupted quickly. This is a transport vessel, not a warship, right? Jake made a note on his tablet. Still, any ship traveling between systems needs basic shielding and point defense. Pirates, asteroid fields, radiation, of course, basic systems only. Jake stood up and walked to the window overlooking the garage bay. The space was large enough for a small to medium-sized vessel, assuming they could extend the work area outside. I'll need to hire some help. Skilled workers don't come cheap. Hire whoever you need. I'll transfer the initial payment today, and you can draw on my account for expenses. Zara stood as well, extending her hand. Do we have a deal? Jake shook her hand, surprised by how warm her skin felt. We have a deal. But I want to be clear about something. I work honestly. I don't ask questions about why you need what you need, but I won't build anything illegal or dangerous. I wouldn't expect you to. Zara's smile was genuine this time. I'll have the specifications sent to you by tomorrow morning. Take your time reviewing them. If you have questions or suggestions, I'm always available. After she left, Jake sat in his office, staring at the credit balance on his tablet. 70,000 credits, transferred instantly, no questions asked. He had built ships before, everything from racing yachts to cargo haulers, but something about this job felt different. Zara had mentioned materials and components that weren't available through standard suppliers. In his experience, that usually meant military-grade equipment or technology that existed in the gray areas of interstellar law. He pulled up the contact information for his old friend Pete Williams, who ran a small fabrication shop in the next town over. Pete had worked with him at Stellar Dynamics and shared Jake's talent for creative problem-solving. If this job was going to be as unusual as he suspected, he would need someone he could trust. The next morning brought a data packet that made Jake's coffee grow cold as he reviewed it. The specifications were for a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. The power requirements were enormous, the hull design was both elegant and mysterious, and the propulsion system called for components he didn't recognize. Most intriguing were the mounting points labeled as sensor arrays, but Jake's trained eye recognized them as weapon hardpoints. Zarathik might have told him she wanted a luxury transport, but the ship she was asking him to build was clearly designed for something far more dangerous. Jake stood in the garage bay at 3 a.m, sweat dripping from his forehead as he worked on the power coupling assembly. The exotic crystals Zara had provided hummed with an energy that seemed almost alive, pulsing with a deep blue light that cast strange shadows on the walls. He had been working on this project for 6 weeks now, and every day brought new discoveries that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics and engineering. The ship was taking shape faster than he had expected. The hull sections fit together with precision that seemed impossible given the unusual materials, and the internal framework was both stronger and lighter than anything he had worked with before. But it was the power system that truly amazed him. The crystals Zara had brought weren't just energy sources, they were quantum processors capable of calculations that would make the most advanced human computers look like pocket calculators. Pete Williams had quit after the 3rd week, claiming the work was too weird for his comfort. Jake couldn't blame him. The materials seemed to respond to thoughts and emotions. The energy readings fluctuated in patterns that suggested intelligence. And sometimes he could swear he heard whispers in languages that didn't exist in any human database. But the challenge was irresistible, and the money was too good to walk away from. Jake had begun making his own modifications to Zara's design without telling her. His military training kept nagging at him about the ship's true purpose, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was building something that would change the balance of power in ways he couldn't yet understand. So he had started integrating human technology with the alien components, creating hybrid systems that combined the best of both approaches. The quantum processors were the key breakthrough. Jake had discovered that by linking human neural interface Technology with the crystal matrices, he could create a control system that responded to thought as much as touch. The pilot wouldn't just fly the ship, they would become part of it. It was dangerous, unprecedented, and absolutely fascinating. Zara visited the garage every few days to check on progress, but she never stayed long and never asked detailed questions about the modifications Jake was making. She seemed distracted, often looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Jake had noticed she never came during daylight hours, always arriving at dusk or after dark. Her explanations about being a night person didn't quite ring true. Tonight was different. Zara arrived just as Jake was testing the hybrid navigation system, and she immediately noticed the additional components he had installed. "What are these?" she asked, pointing to a bank of processors that definitely hadn't been in her original specifications. "Improvements," Jake said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your crystals are amazing, but they need human-built interfaces to reach their full potential. I've created a neural link system that will give the pilot unprecedented control over the ship's systems." Zara's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or fear. "I didn't authorize any modifications. You said quality was more important than speed. These modifications will make your ship faster, more maneuverable, and more efficient than anything else in space." Jake gestured to the central console where streams of data flowed across holographic displays. "Look at these power readings. With the hybrid system, this ship could outrun anything in the galaxy." "That's not what I asked for," Zara said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was staring at the displays with obvious fascination, and Jake could see her mind working through the implications. "Maybe not, but it's what you need." Jake pulled up a schematic showing the ship's defensive capabilities. "The sensor arrays you specified? They're weapon mounts. I don't know what kind of trouble you're running from, but this ship, as originally designed, would be a sitting duck in a real fight." Zara's human disguise seemed to flicker for just a moment, and Jake caught a glimpse of something that made his breath catch. Her eyes had briefly shown vertical pupils, and her perfectly human teeth had looked sharp and predatory. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know more than you think." Jake pulled out his tablet and showed her a file he had been building. "Zarathik isn't a human name. The materials you've brought me aren't available anywhere in human space. And this ship isn't designed for human technology. It's designed for something else entirely." The temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Zara stood perfectly still, and Jake could feel danger radiating from her like heat from a forge. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you're not human, and this ship isn't meant for human passengers." Jake's voice was steady despite the fear he felt. "I'm also suggesting that whoever or whatever you really are, you're in serious trouble. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a ship like this." Zara was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could hear the subtle hum of the crystal processors and the distant sound of night insects outside. Finally, she spoke in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "If you knew what I was, would you still build the ship?" "Depends on what you plan to do with it. Survive." The word came out as almost a whisper. "There are people looking for me. People who want me dead for crimes I didn't commit. This ship is my only chance to get far enough away to start over." Jake studied her face, looking for signs of deception. What he saw instead was exhaustion, fear, and something that might have been hope. "What kind of people?" "The kind that travel in fleets and don't ask questions before they start shooting." Zara touched one of the crystal processors, and it responded by glowing brighter. "The kind that would consider this entire planet acceptable collateral damage if it meant getting to me? Military?" "Worse, family." Jake felt puzzle pieces clicking together in his mind. "Advanced technology, non-human materials, family members who traveled in fleets." He was beginning to understand what he was dealing with. "You're a dragon." Zara's human facade finally cracked completely. Her form shimmered and grew, scales replacing skin, wings unfolding from her back, and eyes that now blazed with inner fire. In her true form, she was magnificent and terrifying, a creature of legend standing in a rundown garage on a forgotten world. "I am Zarathik of the Draconic Consortium, exiled daughter of the Dragon Council." And yes, I am what your people call a dragon. Jake should have been terrified, but instead he felt a strange sense of relief. Everything finally made sense. The advanced technology, the unusual materials, the weapon mounts disguised as sensor arrays. So this ship isn't just for running away, it's for fighting back, if necessary. Zara's voice now carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Jake's bones. My people believe that might makes right. They've spent centuries keeping other species in check through superior technology and raw power, but they've never encountered human ingenuity. And you think combining human engineering with dragon technology will give you an edge? I think it might give us both one. Zara shifted back to her human form, though her eyes still held flecks of gold. The question is whether you're willing to finish what we started. Jake looked at the half-completed ship, at the hybrid systems that represented the marriage of two completely different approaches to technology, and at the dragon woman who had trusted him with her greatest secret. I think I am. But as he spoke, neither of them noticed the small surveillance drone that had been watching from the shadows, or the coded transmission it sent to coordinates deep in human space. Jake woke up to the sound of his communication device buzzing with an urgent message. The timestamp showed it was barely dawn, and he had only been asleep for 3 hours after another long night working on the ship. The message was from his old friend Lisa Hayes, and the priority code made his blood run cold. Jake, need to see you immediately. Coming to your location. Do not respond to this message. Trust no one until I arrive. Jake had known Lisa for 15 years. Ever since their days working together on classified projects for Earth Defense Command. She wasn't the type to panic or send cryptic messages without good reason. He dressed quickly and headed to the garage, where he found Zara already waiting in the shadows near the ship. Something's wrong, she said, without preamble. I can feel it in the air. My people are coming. How do you know? Dragons can sense each other across great distances. My brother Vorthak is close, maybe a day or two out at most. Zara's human form was tense, her hands clenched into fists. He's not coming alone. Jake's mind raced through possibilities. Could your family have tracked the materials you brought here? No, the crystals are untraceable. But they might have found other ways. Zara looked at the ship, which was nearly complete after weeks of intensive work. We need to finish this today. It's not ready. The weapon systems aren't fully integrated, and I haven't tested the hybrid propulsion under full power. Then we test it when we launch? Before Jake could respond, a military transport landed outside the garage with a roar of engines. The side door opened and Lisa Hayes stepped out, her uniform marking her as a lieutenant commander in Earth Defense. She was a compact woman in her 30s with short red hair and the kind of steady gaze that came from years of dealing with classified information. Jake, step away from the alien, Lisa called out, her hand resting on her sidearm. Lisa, wait, it's not what you think. I know exactly what it is, Lisa's voice was hard. We've been monitoring your communications and energy readings from this location. You're building a hybrid warship with dragon technology and you're doing it for one of them. Zara stepped forward, her form beginning to shimmer as her control over her human disguise weakened. I assume you're here to kill me, among other things. Lisa kept her weapon holstered but ready. Jake, do you have any idea what you've been helping her build? A ship that could change everything, Jake said. Lisa, the technology we're working with here is beyond anything humanity has ever seen. If we can learn from it instead of just destroying it. Learn from it? Lisa's laugh was bitter. Jake, this is the enemy. The dragons have been holding humanity back for 300 years. They've destroyed our colonies, suppressed our technology, and kept us confined to a handful of systems. And you're helping one of them build a super weapon. That's not true, Zara said, her voice carrying draconic harmonics that made the air vibrate. My people fear humans because they don't understand your potential. But I've seen what you can accomplish when you're not held back by fear. Your people fear us because we're a threat to their dominance, Lisa shot back. And they're right to be afraid. Jake, this dragon isn't your friend. She's using you to build something that will be used against humanity. Jake felt torn between two people he trusted, each telling him a different version of the truth. Lisa, how did you find me? We've been tracking you since you left Mars. Your retirement was a cover story. You've been on a deep intelligence mission, gathering information about dragon technology and capabilities. What? Jake stared at her in shock. I was never briefed on any mission. Because you were never supposed to get this close to the technology. You were supposed to observe and report, not build hybrid weapon systems. Lisa's expression softened slightly. Jake, they've been feeding you false memories. The retirement, the financial troubles, even the decision to come to New Haven, it was all programmed to make you seem like a legitimate target for recruitment. The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. 3 years of his life, memories, of struggling to make ends meet, the pain of losing his career, none of it had been real. You're lying. I wish I was. Lisa pulled out a small device that projected a holographic display. These are your real mission orders signed by Admiral Carter himself. You were supposed to infiltrate Dragon Society, gather intelligence, and report back. Instead, you've been building them a weapon that could destroy human civilization. Zara's human form flickered and began to grow as her dragon nature asserted itself. You wanted to know the truth about your mission? Your people didn't send Jake to spy on us. They sent him to build exactly what he's building now. That's impossible, Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Think about it. What's the best way to learn about an enemy's technology? You don't steal it, you convince them to teach it to you. Zara's eyes blazed with draconic fire. Jake's neural interface modifications, the hybrid power systems, the weapon integration, that's all human innovation. We provided the materials, but the real breakthroughs came from human ingenuity. Jake felt the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. They wanted me to build a prototype, something that could be reverse-engineered and mass-produced. The first of a new generation of human warships, Zara confirmed. Ships that could challenge dragon supremacy using our own technology against us. Lisa's hand moved to her weapon. But before she could draw it, the sky above the garage erupted in fire. 3 massive dragon forms descended from the clouds, their scales gleaming like armor in the morning sun. The largest of them, a creature of deep red and gold, landed with an impact that shook the entire building. Sister, the red dragon spoke, in a voice like thunder, you have dishonored our family and our species. The council has sentenced you to death. Hello, Vorthek, Zara said, her own transformation now complete. In her true form, she was smaller than her brother, but no less impressive, her silver scales catching the light like liquid mercury. I see you brought friends. End this charade. Zara, kill the humans and return home. Perhaps the council will show mercy. The humans are under my protection. Prince Vorthok's laughter was like the sound of breaking stone. You would die for these insects? They're using you, sister? Can't. You see that? Jake looked at the massive creatures facing off in his garage, at Lisa reaching for her weapon, at the nearly complete ship that represented either humanity's salvation or its doom. The surveillance drone Lisa's team had been using was probably transmitting everything back to Earth Defense Command right now. Within hours, human fleets would be mobilizing based on the intelligence they had gathered. Zara? Jake called out, his voice barely audible over the draconic conversation. We need to get out of here, now. The ship isn't ready, she replied, without taking her eyes off her brother. It'll have to be ready enough. Lisa raised her weapon, but before she could fire, Prince Vorthok's attention turned to her, a human soldier. How quaint. His massive head swung toward Jake. And you must be the engineer who built my sister's toy. It's not a toy, Jake said, surprised by his own boldness. It's the future. The future. Vorthok's eyes gleamed with malice. The only future for your species is extinction. But first, you'll watch as I destroy everything you've built. The red dragon drew in a breath that seemed to pull all the air from the garage, and Jake knew that in seconds, everything would be reduced to ash and molten metal. But as Vorthok prepared to unleash his fire, Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He ran for the ship's cockpit. shouting over his shoulder, "Zara, if you want to live, get in here now." Jake's hands flew over the ship's controls as the hybrid systems came online for the first time. The neural interface he had built responded to his thoughts, and suddenly he could feel the ship's systems as if they were part of his own body. The crystal processors hummed with power, and the quantum engines began their startup sequence with a sound like singing metal. Zara dove through the ship's open hatch just as Prince Vorthak's flames engulfed the garage. The building's metal walls glowed white-hot, and Jake felt the ship's hull temperature rising rapidly. But the dragon-human hybrid materials held firm, protecting them from the inferno outside. "Lisa, get in here!" Jake shouted over the roar of flames and the whine of charging engines. Lisa hesitated for a moment, torn between her duty to Earth Defense Command and her loyalty to her old friend. Then another blast of dragon fire swept through the garage, and survival instinct took over. She sprinted toward the ship and threw herself through the hatch as Jake sealed it behind her. The Phoenix lifted off with a surge of power that pressed all three of them into their seats. Jake had never felt anything like it. The ship responded to his neural commands instantly, turning and accelerating with impossible grace. Through the cockpit windows he could see Prince Vorthak and his two companions launching themselves into the sky in pursuit. "Your brother's persistent," Jake said as he pushed the engines to full power. "He always was," Zara replied, strapping herself into the co-pilot's seat. "But he's never faced anything like this before." Lisa was checking her equipment in the passenger area behind them. "Jake, this ship is broadcasting on frequencies I've never seen before. Earth Defense is going to pick up our signature from 3 systems away." "Let them," Jake said grimly. "After what I learned today, I'm not sure which side I'm supposed to be on anymore." The first dragon reached them as they cleared the planet's atmosphere. Jake felt the impact as claws raked across the ship's hull, but the hybrid armor held. He rolled the Phoenix into a dive that would have been impossible for any conventional spacecraft, using the Dragon technology to manipulate gravity itself. "Weapons online," Zara announced, her hands dancing across controls that looked more like musical instruments than military hardware. "Jake, I need you to think about target acquisition. I don't want to kill anyone." "They're not giving us a choice?" Jake's neural link showed him the tactical situation in perfect detail. 3 dragons were converging on their position, moving with the natural grace of creatures born to fly. But the Phoenix had advantages they didn't expect. Jake thought about evasive maneuvers, and the ship responded by folding space around itself, appearing 50 kilometers away in an instant. "How did you do that?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with amazement and fear. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "The ship's teaching me as we go." Prince Vorthak's voice boomed across the communication channels. "Impressive technology, humans? But you're still insects playing with fire. Surrender now, and I'll make your deaths quick." "Counteroffer," Jake replied, his anger overriding his fear. "Leave New Haven alone, and I won't show you what human ingenuity can really do." Vorthak's laughter was like breaking glass. "You think your little ship can challenge the might of the Draconic Consortium? We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Maybe it's time for a change." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The 3 dragons attacked with centuries of combat experience, breathing fire that could melt starship armor and moving with predatory intelligence. But the Phoenix danced between their attacks, using human tactics and dragon technology in ways that neither species had ever imagined. Jake found himself thinking in 3 dimensions, using the ship's gravity manipulators to create attack vectors that shouldn't have been possible. When one dragon tried to grapple with the Phoenix, Jake folded space to appear behind it, then used the ship's energy weapons to disable its wings. The creature tumbled toward the planet's surface, alive but unable to continue fighting. "You're learning fast," Zara said, her fingers flying over the weapon controls. "But Vorthak won't be so easy." The red dragon had been watching the battle, studying Jake's tactics. Now he attacked with calculated precision, using his superior size and strength to force the Phoenix into a deadly spiral. Jake felt the ship's hull groaning under the stress, and warning lights flickered across his neural interface. Hull integrity at 60%, Lisa reported. We can't take much more of this? Jake's mind raced through possibilities. The ship's systems were showing him options he hadn't known existed, weapons configurations that combined human creativity with dragon power. But using them would mean crossing a line he wasn't sure he was ready to cross. Zara, what happens if we win this fight? Your people will study the wreckage and learn how to build more ships like this one. Within a generation, humanity will have a fleet that can challenge dragon supremacy. And if we lose? The dragons will destroy every human world they can find. Starting with New Haven, Jake made his choice. He opened his mind completely to the ship's systems, letting the hybrid technology flow through his consciousness. The Phoenix responded like a living thing, its weapons charging with power that made the air itself sing. When Prince Vorthak dove toward them for another attack, Jake was ready. The beam that erupted from the Phoenix's main weapon was pure focused energy, a marriage of human physics and dragon fire that tore through space itself. It struck Vorthak in the chest, sending the massive dragon tumbling through the void. For a moment, Jake thought he had killed him, but the dragon's natural toughness saved his life. Vorthak stabilized his flight, but his movements were sluggish, and Jake could see burn marks across his scales. Impossible, Vorthak gasped over the communication channel. No human weapon should be able to harm a dragon. This isn't just a human weapon, Jake replied. It's something new. Something that proves our species can work together instead of trying to destroy each other. The remaining dragon had retrieved his wounded companion and was retreating toward the edge of the system. Vorthak hovered in space, his great wings beating slowly as he stared at the Phoenix with something that might have been respect. This isn't over, sister, he said finally. The Council will not ignore what happened here. Then tell them what? Yulern replied. Tell them that humans and dragons together are stronger than either species alone. Vorthak's laughter was bitter. You think they'll listen? You think either of our species will accept such a thing? They'll have to, Jake said. Because the alternative is war, and after today, I'm not sure either side would survive it. The dragons departed, leaving the Phoenix alone in the emptiness between worlds. Jake felt the ship's systems returning to normal, but he knew that nothing would ever be the same. The battle had been broadcast across dozens of frequencies, and by now, both human and dragon fleets would be mobilizing. Lisa was already receiving messages from Earth Defense Command, orders to return immediately for debriefing. Jake, we need to go home. There are going to be questions, I know, Jake said. But first, we need to decide what we're going to tell them. Zara looked at both humans, her expression serious. We tell them the truth. That we've created something that could bring peace to the galaxy if we're brave enough to use it. Outside the cockpit windows, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but Jake knew that the galaxy had changed forever. The question now was whether that change would bring salvation or destruction to both their species. 3 weeks after the battle above New Haven, Jake stood in what remained of his garage, watching as representatives from both human and dragon governments examined the wreckage. The building had been rebuilt around the Phoenix, which now served as the centerpiece for the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Admiral Rex Carter had arrived from Earth with a fleet of 12 ships, each one bristling with weapons and ready for war. The man was tall and gray-haired, with the kind of cold eyes that came from decades of military service. He had been Jake's commanding officer years ago, before the memory implants had made Jake forget his real mission. You've caused quite a stir, Murphy, Carter said, running his hand along the Phoenix's hull. Half the Defense Committee wants to give you a medal. The other half wants to court-martial you for treason. Which half do you represent, Admiral? The half that wants to understand what you've built here. Carter's expression was unreadable. The combat data from your fight with the dragons is beyond anything our scientists thought possible. Energy output comparable to a battleship, maneuverability that defies physics, and weapon systems that can actually damage dragon scales. Zara emerged from the ship's interior, where she had been working with human technicians to explain the crystal processor technology. In her human form, she looked tired but determined. The past weeks had been a constant stream of meetings, demonstrations, and carefully worded explanations. "The Dragon Council has agreed to send an envoy," she announced. "Empress Silandra herself is coming to hear what we have to propose." Lisa looked up from the tactical display she had been studying. "When? Tomorrow? And she's bringing a full battle group?" Carter's jaw tightened. "How many ships?" 50, maybe 60. "Enough to glass this entire continent if they decide we're a threat." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Everything that happened in the next 24 hours would determine the future of both species. The Phoenix had proven that humans and dragons could create something greater than either could achieve alone. But proving it and convincing two civilizations to accept it were very different things. "What about your brother?" Jake asked. "Is he coming too?" "Vorthik will be here. The burn scar you gave him has made him something of a celebrity among our people. Some see it as proof that humans are more dangerous than we thought. Others see it as evidence that we underestimated your potential." Carter was examining the weapon systems with obvious interest. "These energy projectors could revolutionize space combat. If we could mass produce them, Admiral," Jake interrupted. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this mess. This isn't about building better weapons. It's about building something better than war." "Pretty words, Murphy. But what happens when the next crisis hits? What happens when some other species decides to challenge human expansion? This technology could ensure that never happens again, by making us the bullies instead of the victims?" Before Carter could respond, the sky above the garage began to darken. Dragon ships descended from orbit like falling stars, their organic curves and crystalline energy patterns making human vessels look crude by comparison. The largest ship landed with surprising gentleness, and from its opening emerged a figure that made even Zara bow her head in respect. Empress Silandra was ancient even by dragon standards, her scales the deep blue-black of space itself, and her eyes holding the wisdom of millennia. In her human form, she appeared as a woman of indeterminate age with silver hair and a presence that commanded attention from every person in the garage. "So," the Empress said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in everyone's, "Bones, you are the human who dared to wound a prince of the Dragon Council." Jake stepped forward, trying to ignore the trembling in his knees. "Your Majesty, I acted in self-defense. Self-defense." Silandra repeated the words as if tasting them. "An interesting concept when applied to conflicts between species." She turned to Zara, "My wayward daughter. The Council is still debating your fate." "I understand, Mother." Jake's eyes widened. He had known Zara was nobility, but the daughter of the Dragon Empress herself? That explained why her exile had caused such a stir among her people. "You claim this hybrid technology represents a new path forward," Silandra continued. "Demonstrate." Over the next hour, Jake and Zara showed the assembled leaders everything the Phoenix could do. They demonstrated the neural interface system, the gravity manipulation drives, and the energy weapons that had wounded Prince Vorthak. More importantly, they showed how the human and dragon technologies enhanced each other, creating capabilities that neither species had achieved alone. Admiral Carter was taking notes on everything, his military mind already working through the implications. "The tactical applications are enormous. We could build a fleet of these ships within 5 years? And then what?" Empress Silandra asked. "You challenge our supremacy? Force us to develop countermeasures? Begin an arms race that ends with both our civilizations in ruins? Better than accepting second-class status forever." The Empress laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Second class? Admiral, your species has spread across 40 systems in less than a century. You've developed technologies we never imagined and created societies that function without the rigid hierarchies that define our civilization. In what universe do you consider yourselves second class?" Jake saw the opportunity and seized it. "That's exactly the point. We're a different species with different strengths. Humans innovate and adapt, dragons preserve and perfect. Together we could explore parts of the galaxy that neither of us could reach alone." A pretty dream, Prince Vorthok said, emerging from his mother's ship with his scales still showing the burn marks from their battle. But dreams don't survive contact with reality. How long before one side decides it deserves more? How long before cooperation becomes conquest? How long have humans and dragons been fighting? Zara asked. 300 years? 1,000? And what has it accomplished? We've both spent so much energy keeping each other in check that we've ignored the real threats in this galaxy. What threats? Carter demanded. The void hunters in the galactic rim, the machine intelligences in the core systems, the plague worlds that consume everything they touch. Salandra's expression was grave. There are enemies out there that make our petty squabbles look like children arguing over toys. Jake felt pieces clicking together in his mind. You've known about these threats all along, both sides. That's why the dragons have been keeping humanity contained, not to suppress us, but to protect us. And why we've been developing weapons technology so aggressively, Lisa added, understanding dawning in her voice. Earth defense wasn't preparing to fight dragons. We were preparing to fight whatever comes after the dragons. The garage fell, silent as everyone absorbed the implications. The rivalry between humans and dragons had been just the opening act in a much larger drama. So what do we do now? Jake asked. Empress Salandra looked at the Phoenix, at the human and dragon technicians, working side by side, at her daughter standing beside a human mechanic who had somehow changed the course of galactic history. Now we find out if two species that have spent centuries as enemies can learn to be allies before it's too late. Admiral Carter nodded slowly. I'll need to contact Earth. This changes everything. Indeed it does, the Empress agreed. The galaxy is about to become a much more dangerous place. But perhaps working together, we can make it a safer one as well. Jake looked out at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky, knowing that somewhere among them, ancient threats were stirring. The Phoenix had been just the beginning. Now the real work would start.